My nephew stood in the middle of my living room and calmly told me the bank would be foreclosing on my house the following week. My name is Robert Sinclair, 67 years old, retired high school teacher from Richmond Hill, Ontario, and Derek, my nephew, had been circling my property like a hawk for nearly 6 months. Ever since home prices in the GTA exploded, I'd noticed his sudden interest in my place. But that Thursday, he finally dropped the mask. He spread a stack of foreclosure documents across my coffee table, the same table where I'd helped hundreds of struggling students over my 32-year career, and told me his lawyer had already prepared power of attorney papers. According to him, I was showing cognitive decline. His parents needed a place to live, and I apparently needed professional care at Maple Grove Retirement Community. Everything was ready for my signature. His parents would take over the mortgage. They would handle everything. All I had to do was cooperate. What Derek didn't realize was that those teens I tutored all those years ago had grown up. They were doctors now, engineers, business owners, crown prosecutors. And they were about to remind him what happens when someone threatens the man who helped shape their futures. By Monday morning, my quiet Richmond Hill street would look like a luxury car expo, and Derek would receive a lesson he'd never forget. Derek had been dismissing me for years, long before his parents ran into financial trouble and lost their condo in Mississauga. From day one, he made it painfully clear he didn't see any real value in my life's work. "You were just a high school teacher," he'd say, whenever his mother urged him to show me a little respect. "My dad built a real business." To Derek, I was nothing more than an old man driving a 2009 Honda Accord, shopping at No Frills, and living on a pension of $42,000 a year. He saw a modest 2-story house I'd owned since 1992, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a quiet street lined with oak trees. What he didn't care to see was the wall of 317 photographs in my hallway. Graduations, degrees, certifications, weddings, newborns, all moments from the lives of the young people who still called me Uncle Rob. He walked past that wall every family dinner without asking a single question. "Robert, you need to think about your future," he'd insist, glancing around my kitchen. "This house is too much for one person. My parents are struggling. You could use the care. Everyone would benefit." His mother, my sister Linda, would shoot him warning looks. "Derek, that's not appropriate." "I'm just being honest, Mom," he'd reply. "Uncle Rob is 67, he's forgetting things, he needs supervision." I wasn't forgetting things. I'd simply walked to the store the day he claimed I lost my car. But Derek twisted everything into evidence of mental decline. "The mortgage is nearly done," he continued. "My parents could finish paying the last $60,000 and finally build equity. It's win-win. Win-win for everyone except me." A month before the final blow, Derek brought a real estate agent to my house without asking. "Uncle Rob, she can give you a market evaluation," he said proudly, ushering in a woman with a tablet. "She'll help us see what kind of retirement home you can afford." "I'm not selling, Derek." "Come on, be reasonable. You're rattling around in a big house while my parents are losing theirs." As the agent measured my living room, I remembered the students who once filled that space. Jamal Washington learned calculus right where she stood and now worked as a structural engineer downtown. In the kitchen she measured next, Priya Sharma once practiced her English. Now she was a family doctor in Markham. "I'll think about it," I told Derek. He smiled as if victory were guaranteed. That's when I knew it was time to start making phone calls. Because Derek had no idea what this house truly was, and he had no idea who was willing to protect it. Since 1992, my home had been more than a place to sleep. It was a lifeline for students no one else believed in. Over the years, more than 200 teenagers sat at my kitchen table for free tutoring, some for a semester, some for years. The living room Derek wanted was where Marcus Chen learned physics after failing grade 10 science twice. Last year, Marcus earned his PhD in aerospace engineering. The kitchen his father wanted for Sunday dinners, that's where Aliana Johnson learned chemistry at 16 while pregnant and kicked out of her home. I convinced social services to let her stay with me. Now she was a pharmacist at Sunnybrook with 2 beautiful daughters. The spare bedroom Derek thought was perfect for his parents. 6 different students had lived there over the years. Kids from broken homes, kids aging out of foster care, kids whose parents were incarcerated or deported. Currently, 23-year-old Kevin Park, an engineering student, lived there while finishing his degree. Every room in my home held a story Derek refused to see. A house on my street could sell for $1.4 million. I owed only $60,000, money I borrowed to help my sister through cancer treatment. Derek's plan would hand his parents a $1.3 million asset in exchange for a handful of mortgage payments. But the real cost was much higher. Giving up this house would mean giving up the heart of a community, a legacy, and a message that helping others matters, that teachers are not disposable when they retire. Derek wasn't just threatening my home, he was threatening everything I built. When Derek arrived on October 19th with his parents and a social worker, I already knew what was coming. The woman, Patricia Novak, opened a neat folder and announced she was there to evaluate my cognitive ability. Derek had staged the entire thing. He cut in before she could begin. "Uncle Rob, we're trying to help you. Maple Grove has an opening. It's time." "I'm 67, Derek. I don't need nursing care." "That's the cognitive decline talking." He laid out forms across my coffee table. Power of attorney, property transfer paperwork, admission forms for Maple Grove. A moving company was already lined up. His parents would move into my house by the weekend. Everything was planned, except my agreement. "You think you can walk in here with fake assessments and take everything I built?" I asked quietly. Derek sighed like I was inconveniencing him. "Let's not make this difficult, Uncle Rob. You're old, alone, and childless. My parents are your blood family. This is how it should be." I'd heard enough. "I think," I told him, "I need to make a few phone calls." Derek smiled, believing he'd already won. He had no idea what was coming.
When Derek, his parents, and the so-called social worker left my house that evening, confident they had boxed me into a corner, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. The quiet, steady pulse of resolve. I put on a pot of tea, sat at my old wooden desk, and opened a drawer that held 30 years of Christmas cards, thank you notes, graduation photos, and letters from former students. I wasn't sure who to contact first. I hadn't asked any of them for anything in decades. But within an hour, I had dialed the first number. "Mr. Sinclair?" a familiar voice answered. "Aaliyah, I need a favor." 10 minutes later, she had texted a list of lawyers who specialized in elder financial abuse. 2 were former students. 1 had become a partner at a major firm downtown. Then I called Marcus, then Kevin, then Priya, then Jamal. By midnight, word had spread across Ontario. Mr. Sinclair is in trouble. I didn't know it yet, But my quiet street would soon see BMWs, Audis, Teslas, and black sedans with tinted windows, not from intimidation, but because the people whose lives had passed through my hands were coming home. They were coming to help the man who once helped them. That night, I slept easier than I expected. The next morning, my driveway was no longer empty. A dark sedan was parked at the curb, and two men in tailored suits stood beside it. One was John Min, a former student who had barely passed grade 11 math, but was now a partner in a Bay Street law firm. He stepped forward and bowed slightly. "Mr. Sinclair, we understand someone attempted to have you declared incompetent?" "They're trying," I replied. "Well," he said, adjusting his glasses, "they won't succeed." Inside my house, he set up at the dining table. Two associates followed with briefcases and laptops. My simple suburban home suddenly felt like a legal operations center. John reviewed every document Derek had presented the night before. "The social worker isn't licensed. The paperwork is a patchwork of templates. None of this would stand up in court." He glanced up at me. "They're not just being manipulative. They're attempting fraud." I felt a heaviness lift from my shoulders. For months, Derek had made me question myself, my memory, my judgment. He made me feel old and small. John clicked his pen. "We'll handle everything." A knock sounded at the door. When I opened it, I nearly laughed. 7 more former students stood on my porch: a doctor, an IT director, 2 engineers, a real estate lawyer, a paramedic, and a police officer in uniform. "We heard Derek's trying to take your house," one said. "We're here," said another. My quiet street, usually filled with retirees walking their dogs, now looked like a scene from a movie. Cars lined both sides, suit jackets hung over arms. People hugged me, shook my hand, stepped inside, took notes. And this was only Friday. By Saturday morning, I had a full support team. Priya, now a family doctor, ran a full cognitive assessment in my living room. She had brought colleagues. They performed standardized tests and documented the results meticulously. When she finished, she leaned close and whispered, "Robert, your cognitive health is excellent. I'm signing all of this formally. Don't worry." Meanwhile, Aaliyah was in my kitchen, taking photos of the bogus documents Derek had left behind. She was preparing a report for the Ministry of Health regarding fraudulent assessment claims. John, the lawyer, had drafted a cease and desist order. And Kevin, who still lived in my spare room, was organizing the incoming support like a general. He had set up laptops, printers, and an entire command system at the dining table. For the first time in months, I didn't feel alone. Sunday brought another wave. More cars, more former students. Some arrived with their spouses and children, who played on the lawn while their parents hugged me and asked what I needed. I lost count of how many came. It had to be at least 40. One of them, Detective Rivera from Peel Police, sat with me in the living room and took an official statement. "We'll document everything," she said. "If Derek tries anything further, this becomes the criminal matter." I nodded, but felt a mix of sadness and disbelief. My own nephew, my sister's son, someone I held as a baby, someone I helped with homework when he was 10 years old. People have a way of surprising you, but it still hurt. Around noon, Kevin poked his head in. "Mr. Sinclair, they're here." He meant Derek. I stepped onto the porch with John and 3 officers. My former students lined the walkway like an honor guard. Derek got out of his SUV and froze. He hadn't expected an audience, especially not one made of lawyers, medical professionals, and police. His mother, my sister Linda, climbed out next, face pale. "Robert, what is all this?" I didn't answer immediately. I simply stood tall, supported by the people whose lives had passed through these walls. Derek swallowed hard. We need to talk." "Yes," I said. "We do." Derek walked up the driveway slowly, his confidence clearly shaken. He glanced at the dozen unfamiliar faces, engineers, doctors, lawyers, standing quietly in my yard. Every one of them was someone he used to see at family picnics or holiday dinners when they were still teenagers I'd been helping. He didn't recognize a single one of them now, but they recognized him. "This is a misunderstanding," Derek insisted, lifting his chin. "Uncle Rob needs help and—" John, my lawyer, stepped forward. "Mr. Thompson, we have reviewed the documents you provided. They are fraudulent. Presenting them to an elderly person is criminal misconduct." Derek blinked. "They're not fraudulent. My lawyer said—" "You do not have a lawyer," John said firmly. "The individual who drafted these templates isn't licensed." I watched Derek's cheeks redden. My sister Linda looked around helplessly. "Robert, we didn't know. Derek said you were struggling." "I wasn't struggling," I told her gently. "I just needed you to ask me directly, not plan behind my back." Before she could respond, Detective Rivera stepped closer. "Mr. Thompson, you are being formally warned. Further attempts to coerce or manipulate Mr. Sinclair will result in charges." Derek gaped at her. "Charges? For trying to help my uncle?" "You were trying to seize his house," she said plainly. "You arranged an illegitimate cognitive assessment and pressured him to sign control of his assets over to you." He looked from face to face, searching for support, but found none. "Let's go inside," I said softly. "All of us." Inside, everyone gathered in the living room. The same room where Derek had, just days before, spread out his forged documents with smug confidence. Now he sat on the edge of the couch, small and pale, while John placed a binder in front of him. "In this folder," John explained, "you will find a legally binding agreement stating that you and your parents will cease all attempts to interfere with Mr. Sinclair's property, finances, medical decisions, or place of residence." Derek glared. "I'm not signing anything. This is ridiculous." Priya, the doctor, spoke next. "I completed a full cognitive evaluation of Mr. Sinclair yesterday. His results indicate excellent mental function. Your claims of cognitive decline were fabricated." Aaliyah added, "And the so-called social worker you brought is not licensed in Ontario. I've already reported her." Each statement chipped away at Derek's composure. Finally, my sister whispered, "Derek, sign it. This has gone too far." "I was only trying to—" "No," she said, voice shaking. "You were trying to take advantage of family." His parents exchanged a long, painful look. They knew exactly how close they had come to destroying our relationship. Derek stared at the binder, jaw tight. Then, under the weight of every eye in the room, he signed. Once the paperwork was complete, the officers escorted Derek and his parents outside. But before getting into the SUV, my sister turned back. "Robert," she said softly, "I'm sorry. I should have asked you what you wanted. We were scared, but that doesn't excuse what happened." I nodded. "We'll be okay, Linda. Just no more secrets." She hugged me tightly, as if afraid I might slip away. Then she climbed in beside Derek, who kept his eyes fixed on the dashboard. Their SUV pulled slowly down the street and disappeared. Silence settled over the neighborhood. Then Kevin, standing beside me, let out a long breath. "It's over, Mr. Sinclair." "Yes," I said. "It is." The rest of the afternoon was spent on something I never expected. Laughter. My house was full again. Ex-students catching up, leaning on counters, shouting greetings from room to room. Kids played on the staircase. Spouses chatted in the yard. Coffee percolated. Someone ordered pizza for 20. Every corner of my home buzzed with life. Aaliyah teased me for still using the same toaster I had when she lived here. Marcus fixed my squeaky back door. Priya insisted I write down my medication schedule so she could check it over. And one by one, they stood beside the long hallway wall where I kept their photos. Old graduation pictures, medals, diplomas, first jobs. They laughed at their teenage haircuts, pointed out old friends, took pictures of their own younger selves. "This house made us who we are," one of them said. "We're not letting anyone take it," said another. I felt their words like warm sunlight. By evening, the last of them had left, promising to return soon. Kevin stayed, of course. His textbooks spread across the dining table, as they always were. "Mr. Sinclair, why didn't you tell us sooner?" he said, closing his laptop. I smiled. "Because I didn't want to be a burden." "You've been never a burden. You've been the opposite." I stood up, stretched, and looked around my quiet, familiar home. The same house Derek thought was empty, the same house he believed was too big for one old man, the same house he considered wasted space. But this home wasn't empty. It wasn't wasted. It was full, overflowing, with 30 years of proof that kindness echoes far longer than greed. I walked to the front window and stared out at my street, peaceful again. Then I whispered to myself, "I think I'm going to be just fine." And I was. I still am.